Alrighty, so this weekend we got the first major tournament results since Secrets of Power was released. It comes in the form of the BIATL tournaments that happened in Atlanta. There were a couple separate tournaments here. One was a 3v3 team tournament, and one was a regular premier 8K event. 8K, yes, very large prize pool for this one. And I'm going to break down both these events, talk about the whole meta, talk about some new decks, some old decks as well, and cover my run at these events that I attended. Before we get going, please hit that subscribe button, and if you're interested in some more content from me, including live deck updates, do check out my Patreon as well. All right, so I'm going to start with the overview here, and I'm going to start with the 3v3 event. I'm not going to spend as much time here, although for a lot of us, including me, this kind of was the most exciting part of the BIATL tournament because it's a very unique format, and it's really, really fun. But, you know, for as far as like a meta review, because there's like certain deck restriction rules for an event like this, it's not something that can translate completely into a 1v1 format. And then I will, of course, cover the 8K event, which I also participated in, talk about my run and the deck list I ran. I ran 2 different decks for these 2 events. And finally, we will cover the top 16 from the 8K. It was a top 16 cut because what was going on, there were 2 pools of over 100 people, both playing a cut to top 8. And then once both those pools finished, they merged into a top 16, and then it was a single elimination bracket. People could, if they didn't succeed in the first pool, could play in the second one. So it wasn't quite like 240 people playing, but it was well over 100 between the 2 pools. Lastly, I'm going to do a little bit of meta commentary if you're interested in that sort of stuff. And as you can see here, my team KTOD, with my 2 teammates, John and CJ, we won the 3v3 event. And we actually are now repeat winners for this event. We won it last year as well. The third player that year was Alex, with me and John, and we got CJ playing with us this time. And this was a blast. This format is so fun, and I really hope at some point FFG might start hosting 3v3 events. But basically the way this works is, first of all, it's sort of like trilogy rules for this one. So we couldn't have more than a play set of any individual card amongst the 3 of us, right? So if one person's playing Resupply and needs 3 copies of it, we're not going to play another deck that needs Resupply, because we're not going to play like one deck gets one of them and one deck gets 2. You also couldn't overlap on leaders or any rare bases. Yeah, trilogy rules. It was pretty challenging to find a set of 3 decks that kind of worked, that wasn't like punting a deck completely. And we also didn't want to play like weakened versions of decks so that we could like split up cards. What we ended up on was myself on Quinlan Tarkintown, John played Ray Data Vault, CJ played Talzin Red Force. It's basically no overlap between any of these decks, which was nice. And we also felt like the power level of each one of them was adequate enough. Would each of us have played these decks at the 1v1? 2 of us actually could have. John did play Ray in the 1v1. I decided to move off of Quinlan, not because I didn't think it was adequate for the 1v1. I just wanted to play something else. CJ, though, with Talzin Red, and we did think it was probably like the weakest deck of the 3 in the format, but it was also a deck that we could either use to kind of block matchups for the other 2, because the way seeding works in this is like one team has to sit one player first, then the other team can like target that deck and put their other 2 decks in the other 2 slots, and then finally you go back to the first team who gets to pick their other 2 matchups. So there's like a lot of figuring out which deck you want to kind of like be your blocker to sit first, and then to let the other 2 decks kind of pick and choose their matchups, and or which deck is like safe from getting targeted and things like that. And Talzin Red kind of fit that role. May not be the most powerful deck right now, and certainly it didn't do great in the 1v1 version of like the regular Premier, but CJ held that deck really well. And yeah, we took this down. We actually beat Team McClunky in the finals, which is the same team we beat in the finals last year, although there were some player changes on that specific team. So overall, this is just so cool. Thanks for the Boston Network for kind of putting this together, and Cards HQ in Atlanta for hosting it. And yeah, hope to do this again. And I'm going to talk about my deck list here. And this is Quinlan Tarkintown. And I read the exact deck list that I have on my Patreon. This was being updated in real time the week before, so anyone could have been following if you have access to that. But Quinlan is, in my opinion, a top tier deck right now. I did not think it was after Force Throw was suspended, but it got a lot of upgrades in this set. Nemec might be the best card. It is the best card in Secrets of Power, in my opinion, and absolutely perfect for what this deck is trying to do. You also see me playing one-ofs of 3 other Secrets of Power cards, a Warrior of Clan Ordo, an Outer Rim Constable. I'm actually up to 14 2-drops in this list because I've toned down the curve. I'm almost always trying to play 2 2-drops on the 4 resource turn. And then they're all so good too. And like Warrior of Clan Ordo easily could be like a 3 of. It's just like not quite as good maybe as like Sabine, but I decided to split him with an Outer Rim so that I just have this extra upgrade removal in the main deck, and I just liked it better than Disabling Fangfighter because it fit into the double 2-drop curve. Actually, there's another Secrets of Power card that I almost missed for a second. It's Kazuda. Kazuda's awesome. He was so good. 6 health is a game changer for the way math works in this game. Very difficult for him to ever be removed on 4R from any unit combat. Think like ambushers, even like Cad Banes, like Forloms and Bosks with pings can't kill him. He can, since he hits for 4, he can sit there and block like a Qi'ra flip because he can trade cleanly. He's so much better than the Quinlan unit was because he still hits for 4, but 6 health. Wild. And yeah, like he was fantastic. It's not like the best. I don't want to say he's like the best card in the deck. It's just he's a lot better than Ahsoka. I played with Ahsoka a lot. I think that card is completely replaceable. I do not think you should be playing Ahsoka in this deck anymore. It does nothing without Force Throw. The redundancy in this card is what made her good. 3-5 for 4 is not a good stat line. It's never been a good stat line. It's just because she was incredibly disruptive with Qi'ra in conjunction with things like Force Throw and Spark of Rebellion. That's really what made her good. There's no other discard in this deck. It doesn't do anything. So many decks also are drawing more cards nowadays that she's incredibly easy to play around. Since we're building this more aggro, playing a 3-power 4-drop is not where we want to be unless it's doing something like Qi'ra, which is like potentially winning you the game on the spot by blocking a very key interaction. And the last Secrets of Power card here is Sudden Ferocity. I'm only playing 1. I think you can go up to 2. Just really nice to have this utility on the Quinlan flip in some matchups where you are a little bit ahead and then you just make a 6-7. And like usually that's enough to get 2 Quinlan attacks in. You get 6 on one turn and then maybe 6 to 8 with like a blaster the next turn. And a lot of decks can't recover from that. It also is like the world's slowest surprise strike sometimes, but that's still like a pump out of hand. If your opponent's just like dead to a pump, sometimes that's the pump. And then we also have the Secrets of Power edition in the sideboard, which is Blue Ace. This card is like a monster against the pilot decks and like probably like a Han Green space aggro deck. It kills everything. It's a 4-5 ambusher for 4. That is a crazy stat line. I don't think it's necessary in the main deck. I actually think this deck is quite good into space decks overall, certainly post board, but it has game into them main deck as well, like Bamboozles. You play 9 space units in the main deck. You have Waylay, Spare the Targets. Key, Spare the Target is better than Waylay right now because it has a heroic symbol for Nemec. I think that change is worth making over Waylay simply for that. It came up in plenty of games for me where I don't have a red hero card. I have maybe like a Hotshot Blaster or a Daring Raid in my hand, which you often have to keep because this deck is more yellow than it is red. And then, what if the other card is Waylay and now or Gorilla Soldier, and like now you don't have a heroism symbol. I think triggering Nemec is more important on the off chances that you will need to waylay one of your own units. It's not something I do. Now, there are targets for it, like Falcon and Gorilla Soldiers are both cards that you can waylay yourself. But overall, I think Spare the Target is better because I think Nemec is maybe the best card in the whole deck. That card is crazy good. But yeah, this ran crazy all weekend for me in the 3v3, and very much could have played this in the 1v1, may play this in PQs. I don't know I think there's maybe like one card change I might make from the 3v3. Like, I don't think I need that extra Fennec Shand in the sideboard. I think I would probably just use that for something else and figure it out. But overall, running this back as is, I think it would run incredibly well. All right, let's talk about my run at the 1v1 premiere. So this was, like I said, it's 7 rounds of Swiss, cut to top 8, but there were 2 pods, so it formed a top 16. And yeah, I did make I only played in one of the pods. I played in the second pod. I made top 8 there, went into a top 16, at which point I won my first round, hit top 8, and that is where my run ended. I lost to a Quinlan Tarkintown, and we're going to cover that as well. But I played Qi'ra Data Vault for this one, wanted a bit of a change from playing Quinlan, and if you look at the Qi'ra list here, this was also on my Patreon if you had access to it. It's pretty different from what I've made it in the past. This is much more mid-rangey than Control at this point. I've cut a lot of the top end, right? You're seeing 1 Walker, 1 Snoke, 1 Avenger, and 2 Devastators as sort of like the top end. And honestly, I think I could, the card I am certainly cutting from this deck at this point is Reinforcement Walker. I don't think it was good at all. I don't play Timelies anymore. I don't have Vaders, the 6-drop Vader in this deck. And Walker, I don't think it's necessary. This deck is very good against Sabine at this point. It's pretty good against Space Aggro too. So the healing, it's whatever. The card draw is nice, but in the matchups that matters, which are like usually against hero mid-range grindy decks, you can't play an 8-drop that draws a card. You just lose. You need to be answering their threats usually and playing units that impact the board immediately, and Reinforcement Walker doesn't do that very well. You can see a lot of more mid-rangey stuff here. There's Ogdo Bogdos. There's the 3 new Cad Banes. I'm added Craving Powers to this list in addition to Overwhelming Barrage. We got Anakin's here, and they reach into space, and there's a key reason I'm playing him over something like 8th Brother, because 8th Brother does, kill bigger things, but Anakin doesn't take any damage back. And this was actually something that my teammates Ryan and Andrew were talking to me about, suggesting it. So it's a good idea. Anakin was very good, and having now Craving Powers in addition to Barrage is really important with him, because 8th Brother, because he takes damage back, he's not usually safe, and then he either gets removed, or if you even Barrage off of him, he can maybe get killed by a Luke or something. Anakin, he's gonna have 7 health. He's going to turn into a 7/9. There's nothing that's going to really kill him. You're going to have more bodies to use these effects on. And that's a similar thing with Ogdo Bogdo. It's just another guy that you can use this thing on. And I also am up on 2 drops, up to 14 here. As you can see, we have 5 Sentinels, 3 Lobots. Lobots are very good. The reason I still want the Pike Sentinels in there too is because of Darth Vader. Lobot's not villainy. But Lobot being able to survive against basically anything that would attack it on turn 1 is really important. Something that Pike Sentinel often can't do. We're not going to we're not using Lobot so we can shield him on turn 2. He just will absorb 2 hits usually, which is really nice. Dark Trooper as well has been a pretty big upgrade, having a 3/3 that you can play on turn 1. So there's not a ton of new cards here, right, from the new set. There's Lobot, Dark Trooper, and Cad Bane. But maybe the most important one is the one I didn't mention yet, which is Hyperspace Disaster. Fixes major issues this deck has had against space aggro, because the 7 resource turn is often a brick turn against them, because that's where we're trying to do things like Vader and Maul. And now you have a one-sided board wipe, right? You're on the ground against these decks. You're playing, you have like a leader like Qi'ra, you play Anakin, you have Cad Bane. The issue with Super Laser Blast against these space decks is they hit your board too, and then you're back to parity, and a lot of them can just burn you out, redeploy. Being able to remove one side of the arena while maintaining units on the board so you can keep pressuring means that you can actually close out a game against these decks. And what tends to happen with Super Laser Blast, and what I don't really like about the card in general, is that it often feels like you're just delaying a loss as opposed to winning a game. It is a card that can pull you out from games that you have no business winning. It's like the only card that can really do that, but almost always it does nothing except waste more time. And I do consider cutting it all the time. I put it down to 1 in the deck right now. Keep your opponent honest, especially if you're expecting to make it into a top cut where deck lists become open. Having 1 does mean your opponent has to think about it while they're playing. But basically, I wish I didn't need to run it. I don't think it's very good. Hyperspace Disaster is very good, though. And, you know, I added a lot of the anti-space stuff in the post board and then more grindy tools in the post board too, because you can see that the main deck is much more mid-rangey. But Qi'ra ran very well. My run came to an end against a Quinlan Tarkintown, which is the other deck I was running. But no complaints about how this ran. I'd probably make a bit more changes to this than I would to the Quinlan deck that I showed you. But very good overall. All right, so now we're going to just cover the top 16. Not going to spend a ton of time on each deck. A lot of them are just old decks with some new upgrades. That's the reality of this meta. I'll talk about that a little more in the commentary section, but let's take a look. So in top 16, we have my teammate Chrono, CJ, who was in my 3v3 group as well, with Han 2 ECL. This is kind of like New Age Sabine, right? It's still a Poe Wrecker ECL deck, but you have a lot of kind of new broken cards to play with Han. Queen Amidala is probably like the #1 new broken card to play with this, where you can play her as a 5/1 with 2 spies on turn 3. But Beloved Order is really nice here as well, especially curving into like Akbar. Just this deck can put a lot more units into play a lot quicker by cheating all these resources. Heroic Arc's a really interesting add here because it's kind of like a Death Trooper in this deck. You can play it since it on turn 2, since it damages itself. Its effect's just going to be online, so you get like a 4/1 in space that can deal damage, and that's really nice. The red-green hero pool right now, and we're going to see a lot of those decks in different versions. This is kind of the most aggro version of it, but it's kind of a busted pool of cards. They're just all good. That's kind of what red-green hero is. It's just good stuff, and this is a version of red-green hero good stuff. Definitely the most aggro-y. I think likely a more resilient deck than Sabine ECL is at this point. I'm pretty low on Sabine in general right now. And I think Han too, you know, he may be like pound for pound the most powerful leader in the game, or definitely like the most powerful leader effect in the game. And he gets played in a lot of different versions, and we're going to see 2 other versions of Han 2 in this top 16. But congrats to CJ for his top cut here. Looking forward to seeing some deck updates to this as well. We have Yoda Killer from BN on Cad Tarkintown. This is the mid-rangey Cad, not the 1-drop spam Cad, and I do think it's probably of the version of Cad I would run if I was running Cad right now, because the 1-drop stuff is in a very hazardous space, and it was mainly used to target Force decks and Quinlan, and, you know, it can't do that as well anymore when those decks aren't as popular, and even a deck like Quinlan got Nemec, which is very good against that deck. So overall, this deck looks very similar to what it's always looked like. You have Garindin as a new card, very solid addition into Cad. 3 is a lot. I probably would do the 3 Bazine before the 3 Garindin. But, you know, that's maybe semantics. Sudden Ferocity is another really solid card with CAD. You get to flip him, make him enormous. He's very difficult to remove. You get that closing speed much quicker, especially if you could do like Ferocity into Hot Chop Blaster. You can also like Ferocity and Garindin at the same turn with Plot and CAD. See like one-ofs of Ruthless Raider and Devastator for just a little more reach. Could even have more of those in the sideboard if you wanted. You have a trick package here included because Jabba's in the deck. And overall, CAD's a pretty sturdy deck. I'm not quite on as high on it right now as some other lists, but this has been like a mainstay in the periphery for basically 3 sets now, maybe a year now. And the deck has new tools, new options, but the core remains the same. The strategy remains very similar. And yeah, congrats to Yoda Killer here for taking this to the top 16. Next up, we have Han for Tarkintown. I'll tell you this right now. Out of the top 16, this is the only deck not from year 1 leaders. This is from set 4. Every other leader we will see will be from sets 1, 2, or 3. And, you know, Han for Tarkintown, pilot deck. Not surprising to me, because basically the only leaders that I think do anything particularly close to the power level of sets 1, 2, or 3 leaders are the pilots. And only one of them made it. And the problem with pilots right now is that they can kind of get hated out. They are not flexible decks. Whether it's Han 4, Luke 4, which I like a lot, Boba, smaller pilots like Kazuda maybe, you got Poe and Wedge, whatever it is, they have to be basically mono space decks. That's kind of the only way they can function. If you're going to play a hybrid deck with ground, then you probably should just switch the leader to something else because you're not playing into the strengths of your leader. But because of that, they become very targeted. And there's still cards like Bamboozle floating around in a lot of decks. You just saw it in the CAD deck. And, you know, that's a major problem for pilots. Pilots in general create very polarizing gameplay, something I'll talk about a little later. But let's cover the Han 4. This is a deck that definitely got upgrades with the addition of Plot. So you see Sudden Ferocity in this deck being added as, you know, a really, really powerful effect to have with Han 4 being able to flip, put an odd upgrade into play, and then that odd upgrade actually kind of cost reduces itself. Sudden Ferocity ends up costing 2 because you're getting a 1 cost rebate back on Han's flip, and then being able to play again like 9 resources of cards or whatever you're going to do that turn with that is really, really powerful. I've liked Wrong Ride in this deck as well at times. I don't see it here, but that's probably the other Plot option I would run. You see Aggressive Negotiations. That's an option because the deck does have card draw with Boshek and C-3PO. Now, it does sometimes just spam the board with 1-drops, so there's a tension there. But there are games where you end up with a really large hand, so having access to that is nice. We can see some, you know, like outmaneuver here is nice in just like those racing situations. I'm not entirely sure about the Beguile edition instead of Waylay, to be quite honest. I don't think looking at your opponent's hand is worth being able to bounce 7 drops and 8 drops and 9 drops. So I think I would likely just make that swap to Waylay or even spare the target. Here probably Waylay since it's not really a Nemec deck, so I think there's a little more upside to Waylay. But yeah, this is, you know, the pilots in general, this is a pretty linear turbo aggro strategy in space that hopes to dodge specific interaction from your opponent and create an ultimate flip turn with Han, probably the ultimatist flip turn possible. And yeah, congrats here to J-Fire for his top 16 with the Han 4 pilot and being the only representative of a non-year 1 leader in this top cut. We have Yoda Green Force here, and I mentioned that like Green Red Hero Force is a pile of good cards. Well, green is really the majority of it, so here's another green mid-rangey hero deck, and we'll see a bunch more, like I said. Yoda Green Force, not one that's on the top of my list right now. I think it's a fine deck. I think it struggles a little bit into space aggro, which you're going to have to determine how likely it'll be. And it can at times outgrind like other hero mid-range decks because you are playing a bigger leader. Maybe not so much against like the red versions, but it really depends on like how much big stuff. And by red, I mean usually like the Qi'ra, the red force, because Qi'ra is kind of crazy. But overall, tons of top end here. I really like the resupply carrier with Yoda, being able to like flip that, play that 6-drop, immediately have access to the flip out of kind of surprise your opponent. So you have 8 ramp in this deck, which makes sense. You have the You're My Only Hope. Cheat out. Like, you need some ways to cheat a little bit just because you are a 7 flip kind of slow, clunky leader. So ways to generate tempo earlier with, and You're My Only Hope helps there a lot. I see 3 Vanquishes, which, you know, honestly, like, I don't love the card. I get that it's a little more flexible than something like Fell the Dragon, but you wouldn't really want to be vanquishing small units anyway. So I think I would just opt for the Fells, keep the Rivals Fall, but go down to like Fells and Takedowns for your cheaper removal. But yeah, this is a cool deck. Cloning a Yoda is kind of game ending if you can pull that off. Getting those double triggers. And yeah, I will make, I guess, one note on the restock. I'm not entirely sure what that's for. I don't really ever recommend playing restock in a deck that isn't trying to actively go into a fatigue war with the opponent. Boarding this in is not ever going to save you from a hard controls fatigue plan. Just like having one of these doesn't insulate you there. They're the ones that, like, you're kind of playing into their game plan by trying to rely on something like that. They're built to capitalize on restock loops and vigilance. Just sticking a restock or 2 in your deck is not really a solve for the matchup. And in fact, if you're punting game 1 anyway because you can't like get there, then you're winning games 2 and 3 by trying to get into the restock loop against them isn't really going to be valid either. So if you're going to try something like that, it probably just needs to be main decked, and it probably needs to be played in conjunction with Vigilance. It's not something I would recommend. I would probably just move away from trying to fight hard control on that axis. You might not need to fight hard control at all in the future because it is not positioned well right now in the slightest, but I'm sure it'll be around in some amount. All right, next up, we got Sabine Yellow from Tower number 9, and yeah, this is another turbo aggro deck, and while I mentioned I am not a huge fan of Sabine right now, there's no harm in playing it. It can still get you all the time. It is incredibly fast. This one's a little faster, but probably a little less interactive than the ECL version, right? No ECL means it's difficult to like rebound at any point, but this is more of a space aggro deck, although it is playing a decent amount of ground units like K2, Fleet Lieutenant, Cassian, Bale, Nemec. But you can still count this as like a space aggro build. And it is very fast. Sneak attacks, obviously, with like K2 is fantastic. You have a lot of pumps between surprise strikes and blasters and fleet lieutenants, so a lot of damage that can just kind of come out of nowhere. You could include heroic sack here as well. It's not in this list, but if you wanted even more reach, things like that. R2 is nice. I actually think like being able to put your units outside of Falcon range is pretty important right now. And your turn 1's getting blown up by a Falcon, especially by like a Han 1 that plays Falcon on turn 1, is pretty devastating. But having R2 to get all your units up to 4 health on turn 1 is pretty valuable. I know Davis here, Tower, has been playing Sabine Yellow basically since the game was released. So he is, you know, certainly one that is more likely to take a deck like this into a top cut than probably most of us, because, you know, all that practice. while I may not recommend this deck to most people, I don't think it's quite on the power level overall as some other things, especially because right now I think like hard aggro is not well positioned. There's so much mid-rangey like hero decks that just get you through all that aggro. It's no doubt that the deck still has a decent power level, and because it has all this reach, and if your opponent even stumbles for a moment, is gonna just really take advantage, it can still do well. All right, next we have Ray on Ray, and this is the Ray Data Vault. It's pretty similar to what my teammate John ran in the 3v3. It's not the same list at all, but the core here is we are an incredibly grindy deck. I'll tell you this right now, I think this is the slowest deck in the game. This is slower than like a Qi'ra deck. This may even be a slower deck than a hard control deck. So you have to understand that this is a mid-range deck, but it plays very, very slow. And part of it is because it's incredibly action intensive. You end up with lots of units in play a lot of the time. Lots of actions to take. You have things like tech. Games go very, very long because it's not a deck that wins very fast. It restores a lot. It just delays. So you end up on like 13 resources a lot, where you have tons of options, especially with tech and Ewings and Kellerans and home ones. It is a very slow deck. I just want you to be aware of that, because if you are going to play this deck at a tournament, you absolutely need to be practiced with it, or you are going to be playing draws all the time. So yeah, that's just like my disclaimer here. But the deck is very powerful, and I think there's a lot of ways you can maneuver here. It's a little weak into space, especially game one, depending on how much you're willing to invest into anti-space stuff. Blue Leader, Bright Hope, it's not enough against most of these space decks. Now you see one Hyperspace Disaster here. If you ramp into like a Bright Hope into like Flip Ray, next turn Hyperspace, that can sometimes be enough. But a lot of it has to line up, right? Because sometimes you don't draw Blue Leader or Bright Hope, you can't do anything for like 5 turns against them, and by then maybe Hyperspace Disaster won't be enough. See, in trenches here, they are solid into some space decks, but most of them also do play upgrade removal. So post board for sure, some of them even main deck, so can't completely rely on that. So you can skew a little more removal that goes space. You see one takedown in this deck. The Fells don't usually do much there. Rival's Fall is also very, very slow, especially when decks are already playing like things like Cinta and get an attack off. So that's like one angle that you need to be a little, have an idea of what your game plan is going to be, whether or not you want it main decked or post boarded, which is what Ray here did. Is you see another Hyperspace Disaster, 2 direct hits, Eager Escort Fighter. So he opted for a little more post-board help there, which is fine. I think that's probably where I would lean to. Just be aware of that. And the other thing you need to kind of understand is the other hero grindy mid-range decks, like Anakin, sometimes Yoda, are kind of favored into this strategy because they don't care about the restore. So you're trading stats for restore generally in this deck, and those decks aren't. And like Anakin, in fact, is trading life for power, which is very good against a deck that's trading power for restore. So while this deck can be very good into some decks, it's like pretty good into like Qi'ra, Quinlan, Sabine, aggro decks, hard control decks. It also has some weaknesses into like bigger mid-range hero decks and space. So you figure out how you want to maneuver it. This list went even more restore heavy than I've seen some others because of Moisture Farmer. We see 8 1-drops in this list. I usually play around 6, just the Populous and the R2, which is fine. That's going to help you probably more into like space decks, but less into like mid-range and control. But yeah, congrats to Ray here on his top 16. And I'm going to be interested to see how this deck evolves to knowing that mid-range hero is on the rise. And here's a mid-range hero deck, and this is Copycat, and I had the pleasure of playing him in the top 16, and I took it down on some very close games, and I think I kind of got bailed out in game 2, where he didn't see any of his Cassians for like the first 20-ish cards in his deck, and I would have died if he had. But this is skewed a little more aggro in the hero mid-range world. It is a lot of space units. You can see that. Things like Adelphi coming in early, pushing damage is really nice. You of course have Hammerheads here, which are very powerful with Han 2. And then, of course, you have like the ground forces as well. Gorilla Attack Pod's really nice here, especially because he skewed this deck more aggro. Just being able to like get that extra 6 in sometimes, really fantastic. You have Kellerans, you have Crates, home 1, so it can like grind while pushing damage at the same time. I liked his inclusion of 3 Chams. Just Cham is so broken in Han 2. If your opponent ever ramps and you just play a 3-cost 5/2 that resupplies, it's crazy. The weakness for this color pair in general has always been that it doesn't have removal. If your opponent ever really sticks something large, it's difficult to interact with it. He's trying to protect the pod as sort of a way to deal with it, because you play your own large stuff and sometimes that can work out. And then post-board Fell the Dragons. I think you could even main deck the Fell the Dragons as an off-aspect card. This deck was a pretty popular deck in the Jump to Lightspeed meta. It kind of phased out during the Force Throw meta. Now it's kind of back. Force Throw is gone. Makes a lot of decks different. And, you know, Force Throw was mostly just hard carrying the entire Legends of the Force card pool. That's why we don't really see Legends of the Force leaders get played anymore, because Force Throw got suspended. And, you know, while I completely agree that Force Throw needed to go, it's just a shame that, like, it was one card that was making an entire set sets leaders mostly playable. But yeah, like, this is a very interesting take. While I was playing against Copycat, I was very interested in like figuring out, like wanting to try this deck out myself. We're about to see like 3 more red-green hero decks. They're gonna be Anakins. It's a little different than this because they're playing a little more board control. This one's a little more hit your face a lot, but they're both very grindy in different ways. All right, and here we have another top 16, and this is Han 1 green. Welcome back, Han 1. This deck is Han 1 green. It is a lot of really crazy things you can do on turn 1 with like Falcons and blue leaders, especially against space decks. This is like the space deck killer. If you go back to like the Jump to Lightspeed version, which is kind of what this deck is, it's like the JTL Han 1 green. While this deck is popular, you should probably veer away from space aggro unless it's just the only thing you want to play. Now, I don't know how popular this deck is going to be, but if it reaches like 20%, yeah, you probably can't play things like Luke Data Vault, which I really want to play. But yeah, like, and this deck can put insane space units on the field on turn 1. It's not really fair for space decks. Other than that, the other unfair thing it does is resupply on turn 1 or 2 so that it can play a 7-drop on turn 3. Just completely broken. Personally, kind of tired of it, but it's not going to go anywhere. So enjoy your turn 3 Kellerans or Enfys Nests. Yeah. Maybe the commentary is leaking here a little bit, but between the two Hans, there's a lot of resource cheating going on, a lot of unfair stuff happening, and this is a very good deck. And, you know, I don't have, like, much to say about the specific choices because this is almost entirely the exact same list that it's been since the JTL format, with the addition of, like, Obi-Wan from Legends of the Force being another good play, and I guess BB-8, or is that BD-1, sorry, that's an interesting choice. I've never thought about playing that here. But overall, what's hard carrying this is Han's ability and resupply. And we'll talk about this deck a little later again. All right, we're into the top 8 now, and this is the first of 3 Anakin Data Vaults. And I believe all 3 of them are going to be the exact same deck list because all 3 players that made the top 8 with this deck are on the same team. So we're just going to cover it here. This is kind of like a new deck, right? Anakin Datavol has not been a particularly popular deck. It might become popular now. But the first thing that strikes me when I see this card pool is that every card is broken. And I played quite a bit with Anakin Data Vault leading up to this event. I couldn't quite get the feel right for it, so I'm definitely going to take a look at like the differences in the lists that I had and take some inspiration here. But yeah, like Red Green Hero, when this set came out, it was just like, okay, well, every card is busted. How do we make a deck that works with them? And it looks like Team McClunky here, and this is Tyler from Team McClunky, kind of figured out something that makes it busted. So we got a lot of grind potential here, right? A lot of cards that make cards. You got Mina Bonteri. You've got Cobb Vanth. You have Queen Amidala. And then, of course, home ones, Kellerins. You have units that make units, or units that get you cards. So you, against control decks especially, you don't run out of gas basically ever. Bounty Hunter's Quarry is incredibly good in this deck because Anakin helps you enable trades, and the 3 drops and 2 drops, frankly, in this deck are kind of crazy good. Captain Typho is a fantastic new card, and it's actually one that maybe the previous deck, the Han 1, should look at playing. Cinta, there's only one here in the main, there's one in the side, gives you that opportunity to do something broken with Anakin, same with Sudden Ferocity, but it doesn't usually need to do that because it's trying to establish control of the board with Anakin's ability. It's got a large health padding. You can use his ability throughout the game just to chunk yourself because you need to be thinking about math all game to figure out how, like, against, especially against decks that like probably aren't going to be removing Anakin, like other aggressive decks where you're kind of trying to end the game around the 7R turn. You need to figure out the math that will let you 2-shot your opponent without getting killed back yourself. You've got busted lines here, like Gunji General's Blade can be a game-ending line against some decks. We have opportunity to play main deck Upgrade Removal into Outer Rim Constable, and he can hit for 5 with Anakin, right? So he's going to kill the 3/5s while also being your main deck Upgrade Killer. The best space unit anti-space card in this deck is probably the Jedi Starfighter, because that all of a sudden can kill Falcons with Anakin's ability. But of course we have Blue Leader and Red 5 here as well as some extra ways to get up there, and open fires as some removal. Probably still looks a little light to me in space interaction, and that may be an avenue to attack this deck since it's pretty new. It's something that's going to be figured out, especially for me, like over time, because I can't tell you just by looking at the list, and I did not play against the deck, that it's like gonna fold to space decks. They definitely made a conscious effort to have interaction for it. You see 3 open fires, the Blue Leaders, the Starfighters. You see post board the Eager Escorts, but maybe it needs a little more. We'll see. But yeah, this is like, it's kind of crazy that 3 of them made the top 8 with this exact deck list, and it for me is probably like, look, it's not like a completely new thing. Anakin has been around as a powerful deck in other shells before. Every card in this deck outside of the Secrets of Power cards has been like featured in deck lists forever. But this is a new deck. It's like the closest, it's one of the closest things we've gotten in this top 16 to a deck that's new, which I think is worth highlighting. All right. This is my Qi'ra in the top 8. We covered this already, so let's go right to the next one. We've got Hantu Blue Force, and this is the Legends of the Force monster deck, and it is still a monster deck with some new additions. Aggressive Negotiations gives this deck a new spin in terms of being able to close out games quicker. Because of Kiadi Mundi, your hand is often full of gas, so having that is cool. And then Captain Rex is kind of the other main new addition here, replacing things like Obi-Wan that was played in the past. I think he's solid. You could probably still play Obi-Wan if you wanted to, or a different card there, or entirely, but yeah, it's a good card. There's no Mace Windu here. I get that when you're playing Anakin. I don't think there's like room for both. When you're doing the villain package with Anakin, I think that's usually just better than playing Mace. And that's why like Captain Rex fills out that other 6-drop slot. And post board, there are some new cards in there. There's Galen and 1 Lando. Galen's cool. I think in some matchups that can be pretty nice. Lando, I'm actually not really sure, other than that like he does have grit and you can play him for 6, heal 6, put a giant unit into play. That could be a pretty nice play, especially if you're racing. But yeah, congrats to Overly here. I know he's been playing this deck a lot. He's had a lot of success with Han 2 Blue Force, and it's still a force. And this is the third I mentioned. We're going to see 3 different versions of Han 2. So we saw a Han 2 ECL aggro, a Han 2 Data Vault mid-rangey aggro, and then a Han 2 Blue Force. Lots of ways to play this leader. Lots of ways to play the Han 1 leader as well. And yeah, so here's Grumpy Elephant, the second Anakin Data Vault. I believe this is not the exact same list, actually. I see 1 constructed lightsaber in this one and some Bright Hopes in the sideboard here. It's going to be hard for me to like really pick out every card that's different. Legal Authority is another one, though, that can reach out into space. So I like that addition as well, as long as, you know, you can make sure that units you have don't get removed very easily. But yeah, congrats again. I'm not going to deep dive into this one another time, but really good run here. All right, top 4, and what may be the other sort of new deck is Yoda Tarkintown, kind of becoming the new version of what was Yoda Red Force, right? And Yoda really woke up with the inclusion of, with the release of Rey in Legends of the Force. That is kind of what took this leader from the outskirts to being a real meta presence. We have seen him be present with green as well, although I am not a huge fan of the green version. Red was pretty strong until Force Throw got suspended. So what is bringing Red back into the fold? And it's actually a lot of Legends of the Force cards. And I think Aggressive Negotiations and Sudden Ferocity are probably the main ones, because all of a sudden you're actually closing out games very quickly. This deck does chip away a lot of incidental damage because of Rey. If this leader finds Rey, it's going to trigger it almost every turn. It is very dependent on that, but it's not like it can't find it with other tools too. You have Owen Lars, which can dig 5 for it, and a lot of filtering with Yoda, and there's card draw in the deck, so there's ways to get there. It is highly reliant on having 1 copy of this card in its hand, and it needs it fairly early in the game, but it gets it a lot, and it's a very powerful effect. The Tarkintown allows you to gain back tempo early. It's very powerful in this deck, and then you have all these ways to churn Rey with C-3PO. The knowledge and defense is fantastic with it. You've got, of course, Owen, I've mentioned. Yoda can draw a card sometimes, and then the Yoda unit, and then, of course, the Yoda ability, as long as things are dying. And things are dying a lot because you play to the board a lot, and you have interaction. You have You're My Only Hope as a cheat effect for the deck, and I think some of the most powerful things you can do, especially against like non-aggro, when you're just like trading blows, is you like flip Yoda, you play Sudden Ferocity, and then plot out a Galen, and block an important interaction, and now your Yoda can hit for 7. Next turn, maybe you have an Aggressive Negotiations and you just kind of win the game. And I think in a lot of ways, that's the main game plan here, is because Rey might have done like 8 damage by then to your opponent's base, and that really adds up over time. So this isn't like a control deck. This is almost like an aggro-y deck. It reminds me a little actually of Kylo Tarkintown, and this is BN Reflex, and I know BN Lego Pizza Ian was also running this deck. And, you know, they seem to figure out these like 7-cost leaders that are actually like hidden aggro decks sometimes. And this is kind of another way of like doing that, right? It's trying to close out games fairly quickly once Yoda's out there. Now, where's the weakness it's certainly space. For this one, I don't need to like deep dive too much to tell you that I think this is going to struggle a bit into space aggro. There's not a lot you can do here. Like Jedi Starfighter is fine. It can probably kill a unit. It's going to take you some time to set up array interaction too, because you might have trouble removing some of their units and they might not be removing any of yours. And those decks are very fast, and you're on a 25 health base, which is another weakness here. It is kind of the issue with the Tarkintown. It might make you a little more susceptible to getting like Sabined or Han ECL'd, things like that. And while I do think that's okay, I think Sabine is on a major downtrend right now. There may be still a decent amount of these really aggressive decks that can take advantage of that 25 health base. But this is a really cool new spin on Yoda, and the core of the deck is Rey, and it was the core of the deck in Legends of the Force 2, so I can't tell you, like, I am still treating this as a new deck, but would have liked to see, like, I guess, in my mind, a new deck would be maybe a new leader, or an old leader that had never been played that kind of got unlocked, but we're really just seeing mostly old leaders with, like, modifications to decks. With upgrades from Secrets of Power. And that is what's happening here, but it is a very new idea. So it's definitely pretty interesting to me. And then here, the other Anakin Data Vault. This is Pasquale. And, you know, a couple different cards here I can see as well. I see Punishing one in the sideboard, but same deck overall. And all three of them are on a team together, so it makes sense that, you know, you have sometimes a few different card choices that you find better than one of your teammates, but the core here is the same, and this trio may have unlocked a new thing we need to prepare for in our testing. All right, in second place, this is the Quinlan Tarkintown that took me out. This is Carlos. He got revenge for our matchup in Minnesota's top 8, where we played actually the exact same matchup, him on Quinlan, me on Qi'ra. And he is playing it a little differently than the version that I showed you earlier that I ran the 3v3. Most notably, he's a madman and he only played 9 cards in his sideboard, but that was likely an accident. But funny enough, it worked out anyway. You can see blue aces in the main deck as like the main difference between our list, where I still wanted like a ground 4-drop and he just went with an anti-space card. It's going to be very good if you ever get paired into a space deck. The card is an absolute beast against them. I just felt okay enough to just have it in the sideboard. One thing I will criticize here, Carlos, though, is you cannot tell me 2 Nemix is correct. That should absolutely be a 3 of in this deck. And past that, you know, there's a lot. He added the Warrior of Clan Ordo as well, which I think is a really solid include. I think if you want more 2s, he's probably the next one in line. I did have that one Constable just to like have that main deck upgrade hate. We kind of have almost the same stuff in the main deck other than that, with a few different card choices. The sideboard is pretty different, though. Cartel Turncoat, presumably to target double 1-drop decks, like the Han 4 Tarkintowns or the Cad Bane 1-drop spam, things like that. And Shamsin Doulas, just to target any ramp decks. But yeah, like, good job for Carlos. This is a fantastic deck. One of the best in the game right now with the new additions from Secrets of Power. And the winner is Phil, which is kind of broken because he won first place at this BIATL event last year with Mono Yellow Han. So what ended up happening is the same person won the premier event and the same team won the 3v3 event at BIATL, and we'll see if we can do this again next year. But here's Han 1 Green, and it's pretty similar to the one I showed you earlier, although Phil here does have Captain Typho, which I think is a pretty solid include. He doesn't have Qi'ra in the deck, and I think that's fine. I think just having like a beast on the ground is great. It's also going to protect you or protect Han on his flip turn from things like Plo Koon and other units that may have been able to one-shot him, maybe like an ECL with Poe, stuff like that. So Typho is fantastic. We have the seven drops, 3 Kellerins. I do think 3 Kellerins is right. It's the most broken one you can do on that turn 3 when you resupply, almost always, just because you put 10 resources into play on the 4R turn against your opponent, and they cry a little bit because that's kind of busted. Very good into space, like I mentioned. Being able to turn one a blue leader or a fast Millennium Falcon can sometimes just end the game on the spot, especially if you can follow it up with the second one. It's really, really good. This deck can also grind pretty well on the backs of Ewings and Kellerins and Techs. There's no home ones here. I think that's fine. Maybe if you want to be a little better into like a Qi'ra deck, you can include home ones in your sideboard. But I don't think it's completely necessary. You can also look at Stolen AT Hauler if you want like more fat space units. Also flexible there. Only 2 U-Wings main. I'll have to ask Phil about that. That seems different than what I'm used to. And yeah, but like this is crazy that he won this event back to back. I don't believe he dropped a match because he went 5-0 and then was able to draw into the top cut, and then he won the whole thing. So, good job, Phil. And nice of you to visit us from the EU for this one, just so you can beat us all. But yeah, that's it for Han 1 Green. And let's get into some meta commentary. So, Year 1 leaders, sets 1, 2, 3. They were 15 of the top 16 there, and it's not a surprise to me at all. In fact, the only leaders that I think are particularly like good right now outside of the Year 1 leaders would be the pilots and maybe Piet. And Piet to me is like basically a pilot deck. It's like, what can I do that makes my opponent not be able to interact with me and then win in space? Now, he does it differently, but essentially that's what's happened, and it's just because the leaders in Year 1 are better, and they are. It's not a competition anymore. Like, Legends of the Force leaders are largely irrelevant since Force Throw is suspended. I don't think Talzin is like a top tier leader. Obi never quite got there. Kylo kind of died with the Force Throw ban as well. The rest of them, not so great. The Secrets of Power leaders are pretty weak overall. No, Padme is not better than Quinlan, and Sabe is not better than like Han 1. Jabba's not better than Qi'ra. Whatever it may be, in my opinion, the Secrets of Power leaders are going to have to wait until Year 1 stuff rotates to make a dent. That isn't to say those leaders won't win PQs. I'm pretty sure a Padme will win a PQ, and maybe even like a Sabe. It's not impossible, but I don't think they're as good of decks overall as their counterparts, so to speak, from Year 1. And the pilots is sort of a different thing, and I will do a little commentary on that, because the pilots, they're powerful, but they're also like targetable, and they also lead to like very polarizing gameplay. I'm not a huge fan of the pilot gameplay overall. I think it's a lot of just, do you have the interaction or not? Like, that's a lot of what it is asking, because it's largely avoiding the main component of the game, which is the ground arena. The entire game was designed around the ground arena, with the space arena being the secondary arena. That's what sets 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6 are. But set 4 flipped it. And now you have leaders deploying in space where it's very difficult to interact with 7 9s in space on turn 4 or turn 5. And so you end up in like situations where they do that. You have an answer like Bamboozle or an upgrade killer, or you're just faster on the ground and you win, or you can't do anything about it and you lose. And often it invalidates a lot else of what's happening in the game overall. So that's my issue with pilots. And they are, outside of the year one leaders, probably the best stuff that you can be doing. But you're going to end up in some really aggravating game loops sometimes when you just get bamboozled, or vice versa against them when you don't have anything you can do on the turn it happens. But at least for now, the space aggro pilot stuff seems very targetable. We see things like Blue Ace come in. We see Han 1 being able to just like turbo smash them because he can play 6 units that crush their turn 1s. Even decks like Ray can get there off of Restore into Hyperspace Disaster. There's a lot of tools. Didn't even mention Qi'ra's space matchup, which got a lot better than it's ever been, sometimes even favored. So there's definitely tools here. This isn't like, I don't think pilots are overpowered. I just don't think they lead to like the most cohesive games because of like how you're mostly just like trying to draw one of 10 cards or a couple of like 10 cards in your deck, and if you do, you're in a good shape, and if you don't, you're not. What happened with Secrets of Power is that it actually ended up being a pretty strong set in terms of individual cards to upgrade existing archetypes. Almost everything we just covered and everything that I've identified so far in my testing has been, we've taken existing leaders and you've made them better. Some of them have like moved into different shells, like Anakin may have moved from blue to green because it got more upgrades in green. But overall, the tools are just like very similar across all the decks, right? You see like Namek boosting a bunch of decks, Sun Ferocity boosting a bunch of decks, Blue Ace, Hyperspace Disaster. Like these cards are just going in decks that have existed before and making them better into specific matchups. And that's great. I think the set did its job in terms of providing playable cards. It just didn't really change anything in terms of playable archetypes. Certainly the number one reason is because none of the leaders are quite on the level of the set 1 stuff. So let me ask you, there's always comments about balance and diversity. These are usually the two most popular words to describe whether meta's broken. Oh, meta's diverse, that's good. Meta is only 4 decks, that's bad. And I've pushed back on that. I don't think meta diversity is necessarily good. I think it's neutral. I don't think it matters if there's 4 playable decks or 14. If the 14 playable decks are all playing Force Throw and all the games are terrible, then it doesn't matter that it's diverse to me. It just, because each individual game just feels kind of blowouty. So that's where, like, to be an argument about being a diverse meta doesn't really hold water. But balance is, of course, very important. If there's individual decks that are just way overperforming, and right now I can say I actually don't think that's the case. I think we're pretty balanced overall. It's just, it's still the same decks, right? It's all these Hans, really. It's like Han and Han always just kind of doing their thing and like being the best versions of what like that kind of style of deck is, and the way that they can create very polarizing games because of what they can do on turn 1. I think that's their biggest offender, is that turn 1 with those decks can be completely busted and there's nothing you can really do about it, right? Your opponent goes turn 1 Falcon when your opener was a space unit in Han 1. Crazy. Your opponent has turn 1 Ogdo Bogdo when you had to play like a 2 power unit on the ground. It's, or not fun, like turn 1 Grogu. Like there's things that both these leaders do on turn 1 that dictate how an entire game plays out. And I don't like how much emphasis there is on turn 1. I made an entire video about how turn 1 is broken. You can go check that out. And it's not nearly as broken as it used to be when Force Throw was around, but it still is sometimes, primarily because of those 2 leaders that add an entire pool of 3-drop cards into the turn 1 pool. It's not great. But overall, the balance currently seems pretty good to me if you're interested in playing the top tier decks from year 1, because All those decks are very good. They all got better, and they're relatively in the same power level or power sphere. Then you also need to look at like other parts of like meta, which is new and fun. And fun gets lost in this a lot, and it doesn't for me, even though I am someone who strives to be a competitive player. Fun is incredibly important, and it, like I mentioned, like it doesn't matter if there are 14 playable decks if I'm losing on turn 2 to a force throw every time, and that wasn't fun for me. And the Legends of the Force meta was probably the meta I played the least. I barely traveled to events. I just didn't play very much because it wasn't great. I wasn't having fun. And if you're not, you can always back away and come back when it is. But I think right now, it can be pretty fun, actually. I think the game is pretty fun right now. I think Secrets of Power added fun gameplay, but it probably is geared a little more towards like competitive fun, because we have like very high power level decks that a lot of us have been very familiar with for a year plus, because it's really just all the same decks. And now we all are trying to like break them one last time, make them as best as we can, because they're all going to rotate soon in 4 months. And kind of like figuring out which of these like awesome decks, like Han 1, Han 2, Qi'ra, Yoda, Sabine, whichever pilot, Anakin, Rey, like which of these can we break even further and like target the meta with. And that can be pretty fun, but it's also like very competitive, because these decks are a tier above all the stuff we've kind of had released since Jump to Lightspeed. And Legends of the Force is certainly basically gone as an archetype outside of Han 2 Blue. He's kind of the last survivor holding on to Legends of the Force cards. We saw Yoda Force as well, so it's not like it's completely gone, but mostly, first of all, it's year 1 leaders playing the Force cards, but because the set is so insulated where like nothing works unless you build with 30 Legends of the Force cards in your deck, because all the synergies are built to one set, that if it's not strong enough in the current field, it doesn't really get anything from a new set. Now, it might bounce back when year 1 rotates, the power level of the format comes down, and then all of a sudden all those Legends of the Force decks might get better again, and they probably will. Like a deck like Talzin Red might be better. I mean, it's going to lose Force Lightning. Maybe it won't be better, but there'll be less competition because there'll only be 4 sets live. And Jump to Lightspeed certainly, I think, will be kind of the first thing that jumps into like a whole new stratosphere once set 7 comes out, because it'll be like the last remains of like the broken leaders, and because all the other ones are going to rotate, and then these pilots are going to still be around without Bamboozle and potentially less interaction for them, and they might be the first thing that dictates how the meta moves forward in rotation. Secrets of Power, hard to tell, because a lot of those leaders are mostly just like weaker versions or weaker styles of decks that exist already. So they certainly could, but because so much of the cores of these decks are going to rotate out with sets 1, 2, and 3, it's going to be a whole new evaluation for the Secrets of Power leaders once we have set 7. All right, that's what I got for you for this video. Let me know what you think of the meta right now. Let me know what you think of these events. Let me know what you think of my Quinlan and Qi'ra. I'm interested to hear it all. Again, if you want live deck updates, including to decks I play at events, that's all on my Patreon. That Qi'ra and Quinlan, they were getting updated weeks into these events. You could keep track on the history tabs on what is changing. And yeah, there's a lot of other stuff going on there as well. But that's all I got for you. And until next time, take care.